Good evening, everybody. This is the regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Arizona, to be held May 15, 2018 at 6 p.m. Just a couple points of order here. If you could, please turn your cell phones off, or at least on vibrate. And our council chambers are small, with a maximum occupancy of 49 people. And I don't know if that includes the council or not, but we have our illustrious chief in the background. If it gets too full, we're going to have to ask that folks step outside. We'll keep the doors open. And if you could, keep the conversations, the sidebar conversations, to a very low murmur back there. It's difficult for us to hear up here. It's difficult for you to hear out there. These chambers aren't really well set up with audio and everything. So all the conversations that take place out there, it just makes it difficult for us to understand one another and for the folks that are presenting tonight to be heard clearly. So, and most importantly, thanks for being here tonight. So, okay, first is a roll call.
Councilmember Althouse.
Here.
Councilmember Henry.
Here.
Councilmember Howdigi.
Here.
Councilmember Norman.
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Here.
Vice Mayor Allen.
Here.
Mayor Alinsky.
Here, thank you. And please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, up next is a brief summary of current events by mayor, city council, and/or city manager. The public body does not propose, discuss, deliberate, or take legal action on any matter brought up during this summary. Council members, anything to report tonight?
I have a few.
Sure.
FYI, that's better. I attended a meeting with the Arizona League of Cities and Towns today, the Public Safety, Military Affairs and the Courts Committee. This is a group that gets together once a month until the annual League of Cities and Towns meeting to determine what items we'd like to go to resolution before the governor's office and be signed into law. So it was very interesting. It was a new thing for me, but it's interesting to participate in that form of the government. I also attended, I've got a couple things here. PEO Pancake Breakfast at Larry Green Chevrolet. It was a fundraising group that brought in about $450 to support women and their need for scholarships to continue their education. Attended a MatForce presentation, Addiction and Pregnancy You Can Help. This is a wonderful group for those individuals that are pregnant and are still addicted. It helps them to resolve those issues. It addresses why they're making the choices that they're making, not attacking them. So it's an amazing group. Get on matforce.com to find out more information if you know of somebody that's in need of that kind of help. It was very wonderful, enlightening. Last one is I attended the Mingus Mountain Republican Luncheon. A great speaker. Was disappointed that they allowed someone that was basically fake news to speak, and we'll go ahead and address that one in the future because they didn't allow the city to rebut, which is unfortunate. The city's team player, and we really needed to be out there and be part of that forum, and they didn't allow that. So that's unfortunate. But other than that, that's all I've got.
Okay. Any other council members? I have some sad news to share. We lost the trophy for the Great Sedona Chili Cook-Off. Very sorry. I did work my butt off, though. Cooking up 10 gallons of chili. We won it last year. We held the title for 1 year. Buddy and myself, we cooked up 10 gallons of chili and lost to both Sedona and Clarkdale. Clarkdale now holds the title, so if you want to see it on display, they probably have it over at Town Hall. We're going to let them borrow that trophy for a year, and then we'll get it back next year. Okay. And that's all I have. Manager?
A couple items here. Just to let everybody know, it's National Police Week. This is the week where we recognize those police officers who have given the ultimate sacrifice, and they have quite a ceremony back in Washington, D.C. It is also National Bike to Work Week, and also on Wednesday at 5 p.m. starting at the Riverfront Park, there's a ride of silence to recognize those bike riders who've been killed out riding their bikes. We also have our summer reading program is going to start, and so we encourage people to get registered no later than May 22nd. I'd also advise the council that county probation helped us out this last week in clearing space for the Del Monte Wash Trail up from Mingus, Mesquite Springs, or Mesquite Hills, housing development down towards the airport. And so that'll be the start of Del Monte Trail that hopefully will eventually reach Old Town. And also, I guess this morning on the Channel 10 Fox News from Phoenix, Cottonwood was featured. And so if, I'm sure if you go on your website, on their website, you can see that episode. And that's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't say this because I thought one of you three were going to cover it. So if I may.
Please.
Saturday, May 26th, the Verde Valley Military Service Park is doing their flag changing and flag ceremony, so we'll be changing the colors. Ceremony starts at 1 o'clock, but I do suggest people get there early. It's a wonderful ceremony, and I encourage people, military or non-military, to attend and show our veterans your support.
Okay. We'll move on then to item 5, which is presentations. We have a presentation from the NOVAK Group for Executive Search Services for the recruitment of a new city manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight marks the second of 3 presentations on the search for our new city manager. Tonight we have with us Jen Reichelt, a senior associate with the NOVAK Consulting Group, to share with you her firm's vision for our upcoming executive search. So with that, I'll turn things over to Ms. Reichelt.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and Council. The full house, so.
That's right, just for you.
Yeah, exciting. I've been to a lot of council meetings, usually don't get that great of attendance, so congratulations. Thank you for having me this evening. As Amanda said, I'm Jennifer Reichelt. I'm with the NOVAK Consulting Group. We are a local government consulting firm based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, but we work all over the country. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce myself a little bit and give you a little bit of background on me. So I am from Arizona originally. I grew up in Yuma, Arizona. And I am a lumberjack, so it's exciting to be back here. I got my undergraduate and graduate degree there, and then I worked in the Valley. I worked for the city of Glendale for 10 years. So I actually worked in local government for 16 years. After spending a lot of time in the heat, I moved to Montana, where I was a deputy city manager for about 6 years. And I've been with our consulting firm now for about 2 years. So the NOVAK Consulting Group works with cities and towns and counties across the country. We do 3 basic things. We do strategic planning, we do organizational assessment, optimization, and then we do executive search. And so we really believe when we think about our organization, we're like a stool. All 3 of those things really come together to make organizations better. So when you think about strategic planning and visioning, and I know as a council you went through this just recently in the last year and put together, you did the SWOT analysis and the visioning and the mission statements as a group. That's really important to set the tone for your organization. Organizational assessment optimizations, oftentimes we go into organizations and we look at an entire organization or just a department, and we'll look at ways to make things better, whether that's looking at workload or benchmarking or process improvements. But then one of the most essential functions of what we do is executive search, because what really matters the most, no matter what you do, is the people. They're the most important assets of our organization. And so we really enjoy what we do. Being a department head or working as a deputy city manager, the people you place in those roles are really some of the most important, decisions you make, whether that's as an elected body or as a staff person. And so I know that your city manager has been here a long time. He was a police chief, and then a city manager here for over 10 years, so there are big shoes to fill, and I know that's kind of nervous for all of you and probably for staff as well. So what I want to do this evening, I know I don't want to take a ton of time, but I want to share a little bit about how we approach executive search, and so what we would do if we were selected to work with the city of Cottonwood. So the first thing we like to do is we actually come out and we would meet with the elected bodies. We like to do that one-on-one to really hear from you what you're looking for in the next city manager. And we have a great opportunity too to use the city manager as a resource as well, because he's given us plenty of time. You're actually ahead of the ball game, so that's great. Not all organizations do that, so there's some opportunity to really utilize him in the process too. And then we also like to talk to staff, whether that's department heads, the leadership team, key stakeholders, but really hear from you and them as to what are the key attributes. It helps us really determine those ideal characteristics. And then we help put together that ideal candidate profile. And that helps us when we're screening applications. But that's the beginning part of the process. So we put together basically 3 documents for you. A recruitment plan that has a schedule, the outreach, and target dates, and that basically talks about when we're going to do the advertising, when the applications are due, when you're going to see things from us, when the interviews are going to take place. You're also going to see a job brochure, and that is that glossy piece of marketing material. Nowadays, we don't really print them as much. You'll have copies if you want them, but mostly that's for online and email purposes. And then we also put together a list of first-year goals. And that comes out of our conversations with all of you. And that's a really important tool because that's something that you can use as an elected body as you start working with the new city manager. And you can use it during review purposes, but it also helps candidates as they start deciding if this is the organization they want to work with. It helps them kind of fine-tune if this is the right fit for them as well. And it helps them really understand what you're looking for in a candidate. So those are the first 3 documents that we help work with you to prepare. That's the easy part. And then we start doing outreach, because a lot of times the people that you want to come and apply for the job here in Cottonwood are already working. They're not sitting at home looking for a job. They're not unemployed. And so we do a lot of active recruitment. So we do have a database of previous applicants that we reach out to. It's over 3,000 or 4,000 people. And so there's a lot of names there, but we also would work with you to figure out who is our target market. We use a lot of lists, the League of Women in Government, or engaging local government. There's a lot of groups out there, ICMA, ACMA, that we would talk about, and there might be other markets here in the Southwest that we would want to target, but that's the beginning of our outreach, and looking at the people who would be the right fit for this organization. And then what helps, why you want to use a recruiter versus doing it yourself, is that we get to screen all the applications. So in a most recent search, we probably received over 150 to 200 applications for a city manager search. And that's a lot of applications to weed through. And so what we like to do is work with you as we put together that ideal characteristic and job brochure to know what are those minimum qualifications, what is it that the city of Cottonwood is looking for, and then we start screening. And that's our job, to have that contact with the candidates so you don't have to do that. And then what we do is we would narrow that list of, let's say we got 100 applications. We would narrow it down to the top 15 to 20, and we would do phone interviews with those candidates. And then we would pass along to you in a candidate review session, maybe the top 10 to talk about as a group. And then you would decide who you wanted to interview in person. And usually that group's between 4 to 6. And it could take place over a 2-day period. And those are things that we would talk about as we got farther along in the process, what that interview process would look like, and how you would want to be engaged, and who you want to be engaged in the process. I know there are other things going on here in the council as well. People are coming off, and maybe new folks are moving on. So those would be things to be talking about of how we want that to look as you move along. But I think there's lots of time to talk about that. But what we do is we do a lot of vetting for you that you don't have to do for yourself. So once we get down to that 4 or 6 ideal candidates, we do the reference checks. So we do internet research, we do background checks, so that when you know you're looking at those candidates, you know that you're looking at candidates that are going to be the right fit for your organization and your community. So that's kind of in a nutshell. We just really make it easier for you. We kind of take a lot of the headache away. We do spend a lot of focus and time. We're really proud of the number of searches we've done. We've done over 120 across the country. And we focus a lot on minorities and placing women in high-profile executive positions. That's important to us, too. We are a women-owned business. We've been around since 2001, and so that's important to us, too. So everyone in our firm has experience in local government, so that's our passion, and it's important to us. And so finding the right people to fill these roles, we understand how important those decisions are. And so we appreciate the opportunity to assist you. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about what we do or our process or what makes us maybe different than other folks that provide the same services as well.
Any questions for Ms. Reichelt? Ken, did you have a question?
I did. I just had a question of who else, fairly recently, who else have you found a city manager or a high-paying position for in Arizona?
In Arizona? Yeah, so probably the most recent in Arizona.
Excuse us.
And I will say in Arizona, I've been really trying since I've come on the firm to move us more into the Arizona market, just because I have a lot of networks and connections out in Arizona. But we did do an HR director search for the city of Peoria, and that was probably just a few years ago. That's why we have an ongoing contract with Peoria, and that's what you're looking at. But I did do some research. We have done a lot in the Southwest. Mm-hmm. So Colorado, we've done a number in Colorado, Boulder, Louisville, Loveland. We've done some in Texas, Lancaster, University Park, and then Washington and Oregon. So we definitely would like to do more in the Arizona region. Okay. So if we definitely would love to work with Cottonwood.
Great. And how do you feel about different stakeholder committees weighing in, and do you work with those often?
We definitely do. So I think one of the things we would do as we set this up is talk with the mayor, we talk with you, and the council decide who are those key stakeholders. And so oftentimes it's good to involve them in talking about the ideal characteristics. What are the needs? What's working? What's not? What do we want to see in the next city manager? But then there's also a good opportunity to involve them in maybe the top candidates or meet and greets, community engagement. There's ways to incorporate them into the process. I think what we have to talk about is, are they advising in terms of how they give feedback? We've done surveys, anonymous surveys. You can have comment cards. It's important just to make sure that people understand that the ultimate decision makers are the folks sitting on the dais. Right. So those other factors are really feedback and providing really good information that you're going to take into account. Okay.
And then would you just walk us through the interview process when we've got it narrowed down and we're doing an interview that I'm assuming would need to be in public?
Yeah, so every community is a little bit different, and so we would be working probably with Mr. Horton here, your city attorney, to talk about what his views are and what's public and what's not, and following Arizona's open meeting laws. But oftentimes we would do a first day and second day process, and the first day would be with all your candidates. And you could have one panel with all of you. You could do 2 panels with half and half. There's really depends on how you wanted to structure it. But a typical event would look like bringing in 5 individuals, bringing them through to meet with you, and then maybe a department head panel or a tour with department heads of the community, and then deciding who you wanted to invite back the second day, your top 2. And then having longer periods of time. There are opportunities for meet and greets. Oftentimes you may want to see how they do in a public setting, so asking them to do a presentation as a portion of their conversation, or we often do writing assignments, so when they're looking at the first year goals, being able to address those, saying, what are you most excited about, or how would you address this? I know when I was looking at Cottonwood, sort of seeing what some of your big issues were, what you're looking for maybe in the next city manager. It sounds like community engagement's an important factor here, economic development, tourism, and so making sure that we were on target in terms of what they talked about in those interviews. So I think it really comes down to what you, as a governing body, want those interviews to look like, and we'll help make it work. And we'll kind of follow the lead of the council as to what is and isn't public.
Got it. Okay.
Every state and every community is a little bit different, and we follow the lead of your attorney.
Okay, I understand. All right, are there any other questions on me? Okay, well, thanks for your time tonight. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did leave some leave-behinds with Amanda. I think you have it in your packet, but just a list of our current client list, as well as my card. So look forward to hearing from you.
Great,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, up next on the agenda is call to the public. This portion of the agenda is set aside for the public to address the council regarding an item that is not listed on the agenda for discussion. However, the council cannot engage in discussion regarding any item that is not officially listed on the agenda for discussion. So there are yellow forms in the back. Should be on a table back there with hopefully a pen. And if you'd like to just do a general call to the public, now's your opportunity. If you're here for a specific item on the agenda, which most here tonight I believe are, then of course we'll call you up during that item on the agenda. Clear? Okay, great. All right, then we'll close the floor and move on to approval of the minutes of the work session of April 10, 2018, regular meetings of April 17 and May 1st, 2018.
I have only one correction on the April 10th packet. I was referred to as council member throughout the packet rather than vice mayor. If you just want to correct those, that would be awesome.
All right, with that correction, I would make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
Okay, Mayor made the motion, Vice Mayor seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. And we roll into unfinished business. We have two items tonight on unfinished business. First item is ordinance number 641, amending section 406, parking and loading requirements, D, schedule of required off-street spaces of the zoning code by deleting section 406D in its entirety and adding a new section 406D, second and final reading. Good evening.
Erin Nejad, Community Development Manager. Mayor and Council, this is second hearing as we presented that in the last meeting. Nothing has changed since then. Again, this text amendment to clarify and clean up our ordinance to make it easy for calculations. Just quick summary, we were calculating parking on the unusable area versus now we are doing gross floor area, which most of the places are doing it that way. So that will make it easier. And also one of the significant areas we added compact parking areas in calculations. So for especially infill project, that will be very useful.
Great.
Again, nothing has changed, no calls or objections to the text amendment since the last presentation.
Okay. Well, we discussed this previous meeting, and I think it goes a long way to getting our parking lots more in line with the actual use that they experience, and could go a long way also to reducing heat island effect and generally beautifying our city. So,
Make a motion?
please.
I move to approve ordinance number 641.
Second.
Okay, Vice Mayor made the motion and Councilmember Althouse seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, ordinance number 641 is approved, and City Clerk, please read ordinance number 641 by title only.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ordinance number 641, an ordinance of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Yavapai County, Arizona, amending Section 406, parking and loading requirements, D, schedule of required off-street space of the zoning code by deleting Section 406D in its entirety and adding a new Section 406D. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And Second item under unfinished business, ordinance number 642, amending the city zoning ordinance by adding a new section 406H, bicycle parking, to section 406, parking and loading requirements. Second and final reading.
Again, this is the second hearing for this, and adding a new section for bicycle parking into zoning ordinance. And this will also help bronze designation, hopefully going up to silver in Bicycle Advisory Committee. Again, nothing has changed since the last presentation. No objections or phone calls received.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Then I will move to approve ordinance number 642.
Second.
Okay, Mayor made the motion. Councilmember Norman seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Ordinance 642 passes, and City Clerk, please read ordinance 642 by title only.
Ordinance number 642, an ordinance of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Yavapai County, Arizona, amending Section 406, parking and loading requirements of the zoning code by adding a new section 406H, bicycle parking. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, up next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The following items are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the council, will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. So we have two items tonight on the consent agenda. First item is application for extension of premises liquor license permit submitted by Tamara Morkin for That Brewing Company, located at 300 East Cherry Street, for an event scheduled for July 4th, 2018. Second item is approval of emergency repair costs for Quail Canyon Well number 2. Any council member would like to have an item pulled? Any member of the public would like to have an item pulled? Okay.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Norman made the motion. Councilmember Henry seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda is approved. And we move on to new business. 4 items tonight under new business. First and foremost, discussion and formal direction to staff regarding a possible transaction privilege tax TPT increase, which I believe is what most folks are here in the room tonight to discuss. And I would just ask, as we roll through this, everyone's going to have an opportunity to speak tonight. What I would ask respectfully is that we try to hold the applause, just really eliminate the applause. The reason for this really is somebody's going to be on the losing end of this tonight, and I would hate for their memory of this meeting to be of applause when they were the ones that didn't succeed. So I would really rather their memory of tonight be listening to some very reasonable and structured arguments for or against this TPT increase as council weighs what we have in front of us. So please, if we could, just be respectful of all that come up, and we'll get through this. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, I'm Rudy Rodriguez. I am the Deputy City Manager of the City of Cottonwood. And we've got a small presentation, but the council communications you have with you, in front of you, was crafted by our attorney. As you may recall, we've had several discussions and some lengthy and then shorter presentations, and they seem to get shorter and shorter every single time. There's a couple of items to address. One of them, of course, is to plug in a number in the first alternative there to decide if we need to make some changes to the transaction privilege tax. And then, of course, the second one is that is to make a decision as to have the mayor and staff put together a proposed budget with input from the rest of the council members to go ahead and bring forth a budget. Of course, when it does come back, council still has the opportunity to go ahead and make changes, add, subtract, and make other changes to it. So there's two things that we'll be discussing here, and if there's any technical questions, our attorney can go ahead and answer those. But before we go there, I just wanted to just put up a couple things up there just to kind of brief. Our council already knows some of these things. However, we just want to bring to the public that is here today that is probably not aware of some of these things. The first thing that we want to go ahead and present to the council and the public, and you've already seen this slide before, is the city of Cottonwood, unlike any other community in the Verde Valley and in many parts of northern Arizona, is what we call a full-service community. We have a 3% sales tax currently, and we provide a recreation center. We provide, that is not provided by anyone else in this area. The airport is not provided by anyone else in this area. We have a transit system that provides services with, of course, with a fee to Clarkdale, the county, and to Sedona. We are one of the few communities in the area that funds a library to the tune of nearly $1 million a year. The city of Cottonwood owns its water and wastewater facilities. We have a cemetery, and recently we have our own municipal court. And the reason I point that out is a lot of the communities don't have those, and they have such things as property taxes. Camp Verde has a sanitation district that helps fund their sewer. And they also have a fire district. We fund our own fire district through our general fund. That 3% that we're collecting, that goes ahead and pays for our fire department. Chino Valley has a fire district and a special district. Clarkdale has a general property tax to fund their operations, and they also have a fire district. Jerome has a general property tax. Prescott and Prescott Valley, they all have property taxes to go ahead and fund some of their either some of their municipal services as well as some of their debt service, and on and on. I've stressed several times in several meetings that this is not an expenditure issue. It is a revenue issue. The last time we raised our sales tax, the first full year of sales tax for the city of Cottonwood was 10 years ago when we went from a 2.2 to a 3%. And since then, we've done a lot of great things. You can just see it in our old town, how it's been built up. Okay, under the leadership that we've had in the last 10 years, this town has grown quite a bit. Unfortunately, the leadership took over during an economy, one of the longest and hardest economies we've had, at least in my history. Almost 10 years before we were even at the same taxable sales we were back in 2007. That 3% helped us weather that. And we're in no position to weather a downturn in the economy because we haven't done anything. This is not news. You have to realize that this has been brought for the newer council members. This issue has been presented to the council for multiple years, that we needed to do something, and we've kind of always just gone back to our department heads and balanced the budget on their backs and our employees' backs. And we're at a point where if council doesn't give us anything, that's fine. We understand that you're in a real difficult situation, but do understand that there will be some cuts. There will be some programming changes. There will have to be some major modifications to our budget in order to be able to continue to function. I'm not saying that we won't produce quality services. Those services that we do produce, we will have quality services, but something has to fall by the wayside. Also wanted to point out that at transaction privilege tax, we have our 3%. Camp Verde is at 3.65. Chino at 4%. Jerome, 3.5. Sedona just recently raised their to 3.5. And it runs the whole gamut. There are cities that are charging as much as 5% in sales tax. And we haven't moved off the 3% sales tax platform. Again, this is not an expenditure issue. It is a revenue issue, and we've been struggling with it for some time, and we will continue to struggle if we don't do something about it. We don't have a property tax like all of our other neighbors and a lot of other cities in the area, and I don't think we're in a position to move toward the property tax, but we need some sort of relief in order to continue growing and providing the services that our citizens are requesting. Our suggestion is, and it's been noted several times, our recommendation will be to increase to 0.65%. That would be approximately $3.3 million to the coffers. And one of our priorities, as we have mentioned before, is before we do anything, we're looking at putting money aside for reserves putting money aside for streets, which is a #1 request from our public. And then thirdly would be to start paying down our pension liabilities. And then after that, whatever's left over, we would like to go ahead and start working on projects, on different types of capital projects throughout the community. And with that being said, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Council, do we have questions for Mr. Rodriguez?
I'll ask, okay, I have a feeling it's going to come up. Why do you think we're not in a position for property taxes? You mentioned that you don't think we are. So.
First of all, let me just explain is the issues we're having are now. Elections can only be held in May for property taxes. So we're out of this cycle. We potentially could get it into next cycle, which would bring sales tax the following year after that. So we're 2 years away from even getting any kind of relief. That's where I say that we're not in a position. Now, at some time, I know the mayor and I have talked about putting it on a ballot or something, just so we can decide one way or another. However, realizing that property taxes are going to put pressure on 11,000 people that live inside the corporate limits, or anyone, not necessarily live, but those that own property inside the corporate limits. When you're talking sales tax, we're spreading that burden throughout all the visitors, not just those locally. But it's been estimated that up to 70% of our sales tax comes from outside the community. It would be great to have that pay for services rather than burdening our local economy.
The reason I asked is because it was mentioned that the other communities have property tax and that you said, you know, we weren't in a position. That's why I
Sure.
brought it up. Another concern, and I mentioned this before, is we, Cottonwood, tax food. We also tax rent. And we're being compared oftentimes to Camp Verde, who's at a 10% or a 3.65, and Camp Verde does not tax food. So is there any discussion about not taxing food that is needed to live?
My FYI, that tax was voted in by the public. We didn't just put it on people. The citizens of Cottonwood voted that in. So it's not an undue pressure that we put on them, number one. Number two, we take that tax away, we're going to be in far worse shape than we are now. That tax is a significant part of the tax income that the city of Cottonwood receives. We have so many grocery stores. People have to eat. All of us sitting here have to eat. We're going to use that tax. We could increase our taxes now, our sales tax will not make up for the loss that we will feel when we stop taxing food. That figure has been figured out.
Just for your information, is our food tax brings in about $2.3 million worth of revenue, which of course would be taken one step backwards. I've mentioned before that 76% of the communities in the state of Arizona tax food, okay? That's 70 cities out of 92 that tax food, okay? Now, one of the things that was mentioned was, what about a variable tax? A variable tax, there's only 7 communities that actually have a variable tax. And each one of those communities, except for Patagonia, has a property tax in place. Patagonia, unfortunately, just doesn't have any services, so there's not much they can go ahead and tax. They're just surviving on what little they get, but they don't have any services. So, you know, there you have it. It's not an uncommon tax. It's been used throughout quite often. As a matter of fact, the League of Arizona Cities, during their streamlined tax process that they've been working on for the last decade, has been encouraging cities to go ahead and institute a food tax in order to make sure that everyone has the similar type of tax base. So even they're encouraging communities to institute a food tax.
My concern is we're constantly being compared to Camp Verde. Well, Camp Verde is at 3.65. We should go to 3.65 and a total of 10% like them. But Camp Verde doesn't tax their food.
Certainly, I've always mentioned that you should not be comparing to other communities, but everyone else keeps trying to compare us, so that's why I keep bringing the comparisons over. Forget Camp Verde. We provide more services than anyone else. And we're doing it on 3% sales tax. No property tax, 3% sales tax. And we're surviving on 3%. And we've been doing it because we've been cutting. We don't maintain our buildings the way we should. We don't maintain our streets the way they should be maintained. We're not taking care of a lot of things because we keep putting them off and putting them off. Consequently, streets has become one of the big priorities in the last survey that we had. And that's because we haven't taken care of our responsibility in our streets.
Does the state or county tax food?
No, they don't.
So just municipalities?
Municipalities are the only ones.
And you said it's about 2.2 million?
2.3 million.
2.3 million. What percentage of the overall collections? Is that about 10 to 15%?
What's that?
17.
And that is an important point, Mayor. It's only the city sales tax. It's not the state and the county that's included in that food tax as well. It's just the city tax. So it actually is 3% right now.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that it did go to the voters, but I think, it's regressive tax. There's no two ways about it. I think that to move forward with an increase on a tax that's already regressive seems contrary to what we're trying to do, which is to have the 70% that come in and use our services, shop here, fill our coffers with money. The locals are the ones that are typically buying food, and we have a community that a lot of us live in poverty, 24%, I think 19 to 24% based on the last census. So, I don't know that we need to eliminate it entirely, although some cities have moved towards that. But I think maybe at least if we could think about, if we do move forward with the sales tax increase, at least holding it at 3%, not increasing it.
Let me just point out, back in 2001, because I've been here around that long, back in 2001, our food tax was bringing in only about $600,000, mm-hmm. and it passed to go ahead and keep it. Obviously, it's grown quite a bit from 600 to $2.3 million. So it's a pretty viable source of revenue, and I don't believe if you go down, especially on holidays and when people come up, many of them are in Fry's parking lot, Walmart parking lot, and they're stocking up on food. When I travel, I don't travel with food in my RV. Wherever I stop is where I stock up. So pretty much a lot of it is also coming from outside the corporate limits. I know it's a burden. Maybe you may consider it a burden for those, but for locals. But in reality, a lot of it is coming from outside. And to think about it is, we have 3 large grocery stores in town. If you want to include Walmart, we've got 4 and a lot of other smaller ones. And we continue to be the commercial hub, and that attracts people over to come shop at our grocery stores, and that also puts revenues in our coffers for our citizens to enjoy, such as streets, mm-hmm. the recreation center, which we pay out of general fund monies. Those kind of things are paid, is what we live off of. So just food for thought, that it's grown quite a bit because we do have a lot of more visitors in town.
I agree it's a viable revenue stream. I just personally don't like it. I personally feel like it's too burdensome on our locals to continue to increase it.
And on our poor. We have a high senior population. This is, retirement community. We have a lot of people that move here to retire, and they're on fixed incomes. They're on Social Security, fixed incomes, and percentage. They don't get much. My husband's on Social Security, I know. They don't get much of an increase, and as we're increasing taxes, and then that includes food and other stuff, it's a burden on our seniors. You all know how I feel.
Again, I don't mean to beleaguer the point, but you're talking 65 cents in a $100 purchase.
That's a lot for some people that are living paycheck to paycheck. It's 65 cents could be an item. 65 cents, you can get a can of vegetables for 50 cents. 65 cents can make a difference. Does it make a difference to me? No. Does it make a difference to you? No. But I know a man, I was telling Kyla about this the other day. He was homeless a year ago. He has a job, and he's doing well. Thanks to Angie's house, he's doing well, and he's getting his own apartment. He doesn't have any furniture, so he has to go out and buy, say, a $100 bed. Well, or say he needs $1,000 worth of furniture total. That starts to add up, and those are the people that I'm thinking about. I get it. I don't care. 65 cents at the grocery store, it doesn't affect me, but it affects our veterans. It affects our seniors who are on Social Security.
Mayor, I was going to wait until everybody else spoke before I brought this up.
Does anybody else have anything to share on this? No?
Most of you don't know, but I have been homeless. And for you to use that, and I'm going to say that to everybody else out here, for you to try to use the homeless on this, I find offensive. 65 cents. I was a single mother with 5 children, and I lived in a hotel, and I find it offensive that people are using the poor to manipulate them. The people that are going to be affected by this tax are the wealthy, and they're the ones that are speaking up about it. They're the ones that they own property and they sell property. They're the ones that are going to have to pay that tax, and they're the ones that are speaking up against this. It's not my husband who is on a fixed income and gets Social Security. It's not me who is also a senior, and I don't make the big bucks. I can pay that 65 cents, and I could pay it when I had 5 children and was dragging pennies from outside the seats of my car to try to find them. I could find that 65 cents. So I am not against this tax. What I am against is individuals trying to use the poor and use our seniors to push their own agenda when the wealthiest that can pay this are the ones that are against this. Excuse me.
Just let me add that today received a message from someone that says
Can't hear you, Ruben. Sorry.
that they can well afford the increase in taxes, and he's one of them, well, call it better off people that I know. So there are a lot of people out there that do have money that do support it. I just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you.
My only point is this: many communities, though it is a viable revenue stream, many communities have moved towards a 0% food tax, and I believe that that's an equitable way to tax your community. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to force everyone to agree with me. I'm trying to get a sense here on whether this is something that we want to discuss as a council, or take it off the table.
Can you give us some idea of what communities have moved that way and which ones have actually voted to decrease the food tax?
Here locally, Camp Verde, Sedona, Flagstaff, I think Jerome. All the big municipalities, Tucson.
They've actually decreased it or eliminated it.
Yeah, Phoenix phased it out over a 3 or 4 year period. And Phoenix is a bigger city than us. I get it. I'm just saying that my point is some communities have moved toward that. That's all.
Phoenix was the one that just did it. They did it when it expired, and it's gone now.
And most of them have property tax.
Yeah.
You know, this issue was decided in 2001 by a ballot, and I believe it was supported by like 61%. So maybe the idea is, if we're serious about this, is to make it a ballot item again. Let the people decide this.
I'm not sensing from council a lot of support to not increase the food tax if we move forward with the food tax increase or sales tax increase. So we can stick a pin in it and revisit it later if that's council's collective decision.
Well, I agree with your position.
We're asking for directions from council on the first part of it, and so we can prepare the notice of intent, and we can have our public hearings from that point on. So whatever council wants to do, and then we can move on to the second part of the request.
Hear from the public.
Would you like to hear from the public?
Please.
Yes.
City manager? Is that
No, I was just going to suggest maybe the council would like to hear from the public.
So again, there are yellow forms in the back. Please fill one out. If the spirit moves you and you haven't filled one out yet and you want to get up and speak, go ahead and do it, and just fill one out later, please. And everyone will be limited to 5 minutes, okay? So please try to get everything off your chest within that amount of time. And we're here to hear from you. If you have specific questions, we can answer those after all presentations, but we're not here to have a dialogue. We want to hear from you about your concerns for or against this sales tax. Again, limited to 5 minutes. We've had a council member up here request that you state whether or not you live in the corporate limits of Cottonwood or not. I don't know. Some folks don't know whether or not they live in the corporate limits, but if you could just try to address that to satisfy the council. And I'm going to call these up in the order I received them. So first up is Mr. Michael Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. My name is Michael Matthews. I'm a resident of the incorporated city of Cottonwood. Just on that 65 cents per 100, $100 doesn't get you much groceries. Let's carry that over 12 months and see what a chunk of change that is and ask if that affects people. But I'm going to plow through this so I can get it all done in 5 minutes. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, median household income in Cottonwood, the incorporated city of Cottonwood, is $33,371. 21.5% of our residents live in poverty. Per capita income is $20,000, well below the national average. And you compare tax rates of our surrounding communities. Take a look at their income and poverty rates compared to Cottonwood. I'm just going to run down this list real quick. I'm just going to plow through it. Apache Junction, Avondale, Buckeye, Bullhead City, Casa Grande, Casa Adobes, Catalina Foothills, Chandler, Flagstaff, Gilbert, Glendale, Goodyear, Lake Havasu, Marana, Maricopa, Oro Valley, Peoria, Phoenix, Prescott, Prescott Valley, Santan Valley, Scottsdale, Sierra Vista, Sun City, Surprise, Tempe, Tempe Junction, Tucson, and Yuma. Not an exhaustive list. This is just what I came up with real quick. One thing they all have in common, their total sales tax is below what we currently pay right now. Phoenix, 2.3% for the city. Mesa, 1.75%. Flagstaff, 2%. Now, they may have some other taxes on top of that, but you see, they're not where we're at. We don't have a property tax. We don't have a special district tax. What's the difference between paying that and paying the stiff water and sewer rates that we have? We don't have a special sewer district, but we do pay for those things on top of everything else that we pay. You don't like it when we compare those things to neighboring communities, and we've been chastised for that, but you do it all day long when it's in your favor. Those we represent live on such small margins, they can't be here tonight. Okay, these are Elaine seniors, Deb's veterans, and the 1 in 5 in our community that live in poverty. You won't see them at the tavern or at Crema, probably won't see them at the rec center, and you won't see them in line at Starbucks. You can meet them. You can see where they live. You can see how they live. You can join me tomorrow when I go on my Meals on Wheels route. Okay, I'll introduce you to about 17 of them. You can come with me Thursday and Friday when I build ramps for 2 houses for people whose steps are falling down on them. Their houses are falling down around them. Where do we do this so they can get in and out of their house? Sometimes just to receive life-saving medical care. Excuse me. It's heartbreaking and it's depressing to meet these people and to see where they live. Okay? It's also rewarding and makes a difference. And I can't not do it. It's quite rewarding. And quite frankly, I'm going to bring up too, Karen Pfeiffer. You should be censured by your fellow council members for grandstanding from the dais like you did last week. Okay? I'd be just as disgusted if somebody took up one of these other signs and got up there and did the same thing. You can increase the tax another 10%. I don't care. I can pay it. It's not about me. It's about those in our community who are most vulnerable. Let's talk about top-level salaries. It's the only thing we haven't talked about, okay? We say we're cut to the bone. And I'm not an anti-city employee. It's not the fault of the rank-and-file employee. I've gotten to know a lot of them in the last 18 months, and they're great people. Fantastic. Some of them are just extraordinary. I also hear from them and staff. They know where the dead wood is, and they know where it can be trimmed. The same names come up over and over again. They know where the waste is. They don't dare speak up because they will lose their job. You like spending a little to get a return, and I know you like doing that. Maybe a good investment would be an efficiency expert to go through each department. There are some six-figure managers we could do without, I'm sure. 25 people on the city payroll with benefits make over $100,000 a year. As for the rank and file, we deal with that through attrition over time. Again, it's not their fault. They should not be made to pay for it. So anyway, with an efficiency expert, we might be able to get a streamlined, healthier, trimmer Cottonwood that would certainly benefit them, as we could likely afford to do well by them without worry about this rearing its ugly head again. Do you expect the residents of Cottonwood to be in servitude to overpaid city officials? I could maybe support a 0.25% increase if we see a commensurate cut in expenditures. Let's all do our part. Without that, I do not support a tax increase. Thank you. Any comments or questions?
No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Up next is Mr. Chris Pretz.
Well, thank you for the opportunity again. I was up here August 2008 doing the same thing that I'm doing tonight, which is appealing for no new tax. Now, at that time, we had 76 protesters right out this door on a lowboy, and you probably remember, and we had the guy from Phoenix, which was talking about no new taxes. It was quite a force, I guess. And of course, I was selected to come forward, which I thought was a dirty job. So I'm doing it again tonight, and what I'm concerned with certainly is senior population who's on fixed income. I haven't gotten a raise in 14 years. I'm a retired teacher and also retired from Boeing. So I have a kind of a I'm a double dipper, I guess. But, you know, what got me kind of wired up, first place, where in the heck is Brian Detweiler? You know, he was the man that really was supporting those poor from the Old Town Mission. And I know, Kyla, this probably not, you don't like my presentation because it's talking about poor and those on fixed income. And I'm sorry you don't, but you know, that's 30% of us in Cottonwood that maybe you don't represent. But if you got to look at it this way, 20%, which is about 2,200 people fall under the poverty level, and then 10% of us are seniors on a fixed income. And certainly, I guess we could all get jobs, but after 77 years, I'm ready to kind of relax. The paper was a false narrative, and I'm really disappointed in the Verde Independent. You know, to come on and imply that all these people want a tax raise was absolutely insane, Kelsey. I didn't appreciate that. And so I read the paper. Gosh, I must be nervous. As far as I'm concerned, we also are overdue for sales tax. Oh, you got to be kidding me. You know, even in Bible days, they didn't want to pay taxes. You know, Matthew was hated because he was a tax collector. So, you know, Cottonwood explores raising sales tax, and this other one, another beauty, Cottonwood to decide whether to raise taxes amid public support for increase. So what we have basically is 10 people from the rec center. I support the rec center. I would love to be on their foundation and privately give money to support them. But for 10 people to represent all the seniors and all the people in poverty is insane for especially an article in a newspaper to go at everyone supports a tax raise. That's a false narrative. In other words, it's a lie. and I'm ashamed to even take that paper anymore. Journal Extra did a very nice job. Excellent, excellent reporting. So I'm proud to say we at least got the straight news. So as I said before, Brian Detweiler had a really heart since he was seeing people, and anyone here who's been over at the Old Town Mission knows what I'm saying. These people are on their last leg. Now, certainly they have emotional problems. They have, you know, in other words, they got medical issues. They got reasons why they're not working. Maybe that's why they're in the poverty level. I don't know. But, you know, when people look at $10 an hour, oh my gosh, this has to be 28 years, 30 years ago that I made $10 an hour. And you know, teachers aren't exactly overpaid, but we certainly lived above the poverty level. So my thing tonight is protesting the tax raise. The food tax is what it really is. And that was our appeal way back 2008, August, was it's basically a food tax. And so what I'd like to say is, when you have a $72 million budget, there's cuts. If you only got $1.2 million shortfall, and you want to buy a $2 million building and renovate it for $2 more million, and you want to give a 5% COLA, you only have to come up with 1.2% shortfall. Instead, you want to lay it on the taxpayer again. Now, sure, 65 cents doesn't sound like a lot, but think about it. You already did a use tax. Now you're adding another tax. And I guarantee it won't be 2 years you'll be asking for a city property tax. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. No use tax yet, but stay tuned. All right, next up is Ms. Sherry Twomley. Evening.
Honorable Mayor and council members. My name is Sherry Twomley. I'm from the Verde Village. I own Amigos del Verde Valley Volunteer Coalition, which won the State Community Service Award in 2015 for the entire state. Secondly, I won the Hometown Hero Award because I helped the poor people. I helped them stay in their homes. I helped them watch them try to struggle to eat every week, and they get their water turned off, and NACOG can no longer help. All you have to do is call them and ask them why, because the rates are too high. Talking today with Margaret Paddock, the former president of the Verde Village Property Owners Association, witnesses this every day. She asked me tonight to read a letter in response to Kyla Allen, Vice Mayor's post on Facebook, where she said all this means is 2 cents to somebody that's poor to a $3 gallon of milk. That is absolutely ridiculous. Housing, food, and water are necessities of life. This means hundreds of dollars of years collectively out of their wallet. That's 1 month of their income. The problem we have is that the city council is insulated from these people. They're not dealing with reality. Absolutely 25% or more are living in poverty. Where are you coming from? Giving yourselves bigger salaries every year. So I'm going to read the letter. While the tax increase seems insignificant to you, it is not for those on a restrictive low budget and for those trying to raise a family. For a low-income person, this increase was a terrible struggle for them. As costs for utilities such as water increases are going to continue, they're even going to struggle more. Your threat that citizens will have to do without services, Kyla, if they don't approve the sales tax increase, is a poor scare tactic. How dare you threaten citizens in order to get your tax increase approved? The council's done nothing to show they will manage their funds any better than they managed them than they had before. The council, you in particular, Kyla, gave a 6% retroactive pay increase to your ex-boss, Doug Bartosh. Another 4% following that. When he announces he's leaving in January, he already receives a big salary. And you and your crony city council members squandered the reserve funds. They're gone. There's 60 days in reserves left. There's nothing to fall back for any needed emergencies like the Mingus sewer plant that needs serious repairs. This is extremely irresponsible. It is people like you that sat on this council for 13 years and disgracefully put this city into a financial crisis. This type of thinking is incomprehensible. If you managed your money at home the way you manage the city, you'd all be on welfare. Are you honestly going to continue your spending to the point of the city going into receivership and being run by the state? Your smartest financial move at this point is to cut expenses and forget about building, a new gem city hall. That's not a necessity. Why don't you understand that Peter has run out of money to pay Paul? This meager tax increase is not going to solve your financial crisis that you created. You know that, and citizens know it. It's simply too big of a debt. The citizens of Cottonwood deserve better representation. They and those in the surrounding communities should not be punished financially because of your ineptness. Do something right for a change and cut your expenses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Twombly. We have a couple candidates for city council in the audience tonight. I'm just not sure if they're going to follow through with running for office. We take some blows up here.
Just run.
We take some blows up here, but we can handle it. We do really appreciate everyone coming in tonight. If we could just focus our effort and our discussion to the full council, though, I would hate to see individual council members called out.
Excuse me, but that's okay. If I'm on Michael's list, I'm doing the right thing.
Okay. All right, moving on to Miss Lorraine, is it Adesso? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for letting me speak. The questions appears to be the very small percentage of people that are low income and can't afford the increase. Is there something, you're leaving all this 70% on the table for the people who are out of our community, who can afford it, and then another 20% or so of us who live in Cottonwood who can afford it. And there's that small percentage that can't. Isn't there some way you could, from your reserve, help those people? We register for Toys for Tots in 2 hours. Hundreds of children. Their parents come in with a card that say they're on assistance. We know how many children they have, what sex, what age. We sort the gifts. They have this big party. We give them something, and we do it in such a short period of time. Can't you come up with something rather than disregarding all the income that you could be making to possibly give them something, and whether it be in some sort of food program or coupons? There must be another way to help the 10% of the 30% in Cottonwood. There must be something you could come up with that you wouldn't just not take into consideration all that money that's on the table from the 70%. It just doesn't make sense to me. We're talking at a small percentage of people. You've got all these minds here who work very hard. I'm really impressed. I've been at 4 council meetings and just how serious you take this and how much research you do. I'm sure you could come up with something to give these people who are on a fixed income, who are very poor, considered low income, give them something back. It can't be that difficult, I'm sure. I came to Cottonwood. I could have lived in Sedona. I could have lived in any of the areas around here. I selected Cottonwood because it is a special place. You have to have the money coming in so that you can pay the people to do what they need to do to keep this a vital community that we love. Don't just disregard this tax because of a few people. Try to help them.
Thank you. So last, and again, folks, everyone here tonight is welcome to address council, but I only have one left, and that's Miss Jane Lawman. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Jane Lauman, and I live I have a Cornville address, and my husband and I are retired teachers, and we are on a fixed income, but we are fortunate in what we have. And we would like to, we moved here because we appreciate the comprehensive community of Cottonwood that addresses the needs of all different cultures and ethnicities and income levels and ages. There's so many wonderful services here for people of all ages. We would like to help support that. We would like to see you adopt this new sales tax so that we can help support the services that we enjoy in Cottonwood. And I have to say one more thing. Excuse me. My mom lived in Cottonwood for 30 years. She wasn't as fortunate as we are. She lived on a Social Security check that was like, I can't remember what it was, $600 or $700 a month. My mom supported school tax overrides. She supported any civic thing that would better the lives of the people in Cottonwood, even though she lived very meagerly. And I think that, of course, we were around to help her out when she needed help. But I believe that there's so many services available to the people in Cottonwood that we hope continue that help people on limited incomes and help them enjoy their lives and seek the services that they need. So my husband and I would like to support the additional sales tax, and we would like to be able to support Cottonwood in that way by paying our fair share. We do all our shopping here. We drive on your streets. We go to your library. We go to the rec center. And we appreciate what your schools do for your students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lohman. Okay. Up next, Terry Clements.
I've written a lot of letters to all of you. I've written a lot of letters to the editors of both newspapers. I've replied online to a lot of the comments. I think there's a tremendous amount of misinformation that's being bandied about, and I'm really concerned about it because...
Could you pull the mic a bit closer? I think I'm getting a signal from the back that we might not be able to hear you. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's all right. I'm really kind of astounded by it all. I really don't quite get it. I mean, we have a town of about, what, I think 11,008, something like that. We service an area of, what, 32 to 40. Michael was talking about people in poverty in Cottonwood. I would guess that we've got kind of the same numbers in Camp Verde, for example, and some of the other communities in the area. But I bet when we go back to when this sales tax was passed by Cottonwood residents, I'll bet the poverty level was the same or even worse, because we've had a huge influx of people all the time. And those people, like Jane's mom, were willing to do for the community what they thought was right. The problem is we can cut costs forever, and I just, I've looked at the budgets, I've been to your sessions, the budgetary sessions, I've looked at what you're looking at. I don't see a tremendous amount of fat. Michael implies that all the city employees are overpaid. I've looked at that. You have 4 contract employees that I think most people would say are pretty overpaid. And those, I hope and I think, will be dealt with when they come up again. But if you look at rank and file, it's my understanding, I've looked at a lot of them and I've compared a lot of them to other cities. From what I hear from some of the department heads the other night, last week, you have trouble getting qualified people, don't you, for police and fire? You have to have good people to run the city. And you have to have enough resources to run the city. And I live here. He also implied that just a bunch of pickleball players. I'm sorry, but that's not the case. I have friends here from the community where I live here in Cottonwood. All of my friends, as far as I know, are seniors. I hope they don't mind me saying that. As far as I know as well, they're all on a fixed income. As I am, I'm a senior. I'm on Social Security. I have a very small pension. I had my own business here for years. I actually paid the 10.35% tax we had for a short time. I actually paid that in my business. And I heard my customers, they came from here, they came from everywhere, and they paid that kind of money in other places as well. Most people complain about the sales tax, but when it comes right down to it, is that all we've got? I think it is. And do we want a property tax? I don't. I would rather have the people outside our area help me pay for our police. By the way, as I understand it, our police and fire people go outside our city limits. I believe that's the case. If somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. So these people who are outside the city, one of whom wrote to the Verde Independent today, it'll be in tomorrow's newspaper, it was online today, said basically, what do I get out of this? Well, I think you get fire protection when your house is burning down. I think you get police protection if somebody's breaking into your house. I think there's a lot of stuff you get. I think you get to ride on our roads. You get to shop in our businesses and come to our businesses. There are a lot of things that you get here from outside the area. And I don't want to pay for that. As a citizen of Cottonwood, I don't want to pay for all that. I mean, I don't mind doing this for a larger community. I don't mind that at all. But I think we need to all share that burden. And so I think 365 is the correct number because we don't have a property tax. Every other town in the Verde Valley does have a property tax of some kind. We don't have it. I don't think we should have it for the reasons I just stated. But then we have to have something else instead. And I'll go back to my argument. You're probably sick of it. We need to build those reserves up. We don't have anything. We need to build them. And we didn't just spend them just to spend them. We spent them because we had a big recession a decade ago and we lost a lot of money. So we need those reserves. We need to take care of our infrastructure. These are not tiny, minuscule items. These will take years of putting away a lot of money every year to do. And the last thing is paying down our liabilities. The state in its wisdom has passed some liabilities on to us, unfunded pension liabilities, which now we have to do. So I think we need to do that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Clements. All right, folks, last chance. Yellow form, very simple to fill out. Anybody else from the public? Okay.
Hi, my name is Donna Fulton. Hello to everybody. I'm a Cottonwood resident, and I agree with everything Rudy said. I think it's just totally, totally necessary, and the time is now to act on this 0.65 increase so that Cottonwood can have an income stream and become solvent enough to do the things it needs to do. I agree with Carla 100% about the poor. I think that people have commonly used the poor to advance their own agendas. They become pawns. The other thing is that I've seen, because, well, a few of us just got back from working at the food bank, and it's a wonderful program, and there's so many programs for people in need. You know, the senior center, Meals on Wheels, the food bank. You know, I'm sure there are other things also that I may not be aware of, and I I see a lot of people that are in need, and as a matter of fact, I've been asked to be on the board of Steps to Recovery and institutions like that. And believe me when I say this, even poor people have their own priorities. They, when given a chance, when having a certain amount of income, I've seen people smoking, people drinking, people spending their money on things other than food. And so, you know, we all have the same human tendencies, and I just, you know, wanted to put that out there because it's not, just an image of somebody. There are just so many programs to help people get a foothold and improve their lives. And the other thing too is that I really appreciated what Jane said about her mother, because there are a lot of people like her in this community that even though they don't have much or we don't have much, we're willing to pay our fair share, and don't take that away from us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other folks tonight? No? Okay. I remember the last sales tax increase, 0.8%. I remember thinking, I'm sure glad I'm not mayor.
Careful what you wish for.
But here we are, so I've gotten the sense that this council is more or less in favor of a sales tax increase of some sort. I think there's a lot of light between us on what that looks like. So at some point, we have to try to narrow this down and make a vote tonight that will pass. And I know all of us have a line in the sand. I know I've got a line in the sand. But we do have to, show our community that we can work together. We can compromise. This is going to be one of those situations where not a single one of us is truly satisfied, and I'm certainly prepared for that. And I hope we're all prepared for that. And this is going to come down to compromising and maybe giving a little bit on that line in the sand. So, how would you like to move this conversation forward?
I think you know how I was pretty clear last week. I think a couple of us expressed how we felt, and I think personally I'd like to hear from those who waited until tonight and begin the discussion there.
Okay.
I agree. I think some of us have been very vocal, and everybody knows where we stand, and others have not. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, my hesitation is that as we know, during a work session, we don't make decisions, and
Right.
my feeling was we were being asked to make a decision at that time.
I agree.
And that was my reasoning on that right there. And I know it's happened before. When I was mayor for 10 years, this is the way I was instructed to do things, that we could not vote during a work session. I have seen it loosen up here in the last few years, and I was just reiterating what I learned over 10 years as mayor. This is not an easy decision. Not an easy decision. Initially, when we started talking about, it was mentioned to raise sales tax, my first thought was, no way, no way, okay? Bigger than that is I've always been opposed to a property tax. The property tax is going to impact more people, especially the small businessman in this community, than this tax or a food tax. So my question is this. We've talked about people that live outside the area that spend a lot of their money here in town, and they impact our infrastructure, okay? There's no other way we're going to collect on that without having sales tax and even the food tax. I think the food tax is a viable tax that was supported by the majority in this community as recently as 2001. So I came in with a lot of reservations. But along with that, I do see the need for an increase. I'm not with the 0.65. I'm not at the 0.50. I was thinking more of the 2.5 as far as that goes. It covers what we need to cover. Obviously, in the future, they may well look at these issues again, but that's a different story. I think with the 2.5, we can carry on business with the community without going, and the other thing is, I get this feeling that, like anything else, the more money we get, the more money we may want to spend. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So anyway, I'll cut it short and say that I would support the increase in sales tax. And mind you, I know a lot of seniors. I know a lot of people in this community. I've heard support on both sides, and this is about as minimal as it's going to get. And so it's not without a black heart or wanting to be vindictive to anyone, but the fact is, I do feel we need a slight increase, and that would be where I'd go with a 0.25.
Excuse me, Ruben, do you mean 0.25 would be great? Do you mean
2.25, not
yeah,
2.5.
Not 2.5,
Oh,
but
did I say 2.5?
Let's go for it. No.
Yeah, well, let's not vote on that one right now.
okay.
No.
I'll make the motion right now if you want me to.
Okay, I'm the other one that didn't speak last time because I was with Ruben on we're not supposed to make a decision now, and we're kind of being pushed into it. Everybody kind of knows where I stand. I think a 0.25 is not quite enough. I think we're going to be back here in a very short period of time. And pardon me, I've got the Kirsten curse. I am losing my voice. It's your fault. So I do favor an increase in the tax. I know that it's going to affect us. I'm one of the people out there that it's going to affect. I would be for 0.65, but I don't think this council is going to go for that. So I am willing to compromise, as I hope they will, to a 0.5, but I don't think anything below that, we're going to end up coming back to council in a very short time, and I think what we've got going on here is not always, it can be destructive to a community, and it can cause hard feelings, and let's do it right now, and then hopefully we'll go another 10, 20 years before this comes up again. So I would be willing to compromise to a 0.5.
Anybody else care to share their thoughts this evening?
Okay. It's still a free country, free speech, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. I voiced that I would go for 1. I would settle for 0.65, but I don't think, like Kyla, I don't think we've got the votes for that, but I do hope we do have the votes for 0.50. I prefer 0.65, and we'll just leave it at that for now.
I also was in favor of the 0.65, but that way we would have had some money in reserve, and we could fix our streets where they need it very badly, and a lot of other things, but I would settle for 0.5.
Okay. Councilmember Althouse or Henry, would you care to comment on what's been discussed?
When we look at the scenarios, I'm still in favor of reasonable cuts and a small increase. I think the 0.25 is adequate to meet the anticipated shortfall. I think we can take some things off the table. We're asking our department heads to cut. I think council can cut. We can cut out a new city hall. If we're talking cuts, that removes a large chunk of change for our capital projects. And I think that we can reallocate our resources to address reserves. The 0.25 includes another 25%, I believe, in the designation for reserves, which I believe that 25% remains the same throughout all of the scenarios that we were provided as council. So we're addressing reserves. I think that we can also reallocate and address some of the deferred maintenance projects. I think as a city, we're always going to have to defer maintenance. We're always going to have a schedule. We don't have the means to address everything as quickly as some of our constituents would like, but I would like to see us move forward more quickly on the road and sidewalk improvements and or maintenance, and also address paying down our liabilities. And I just, from the scenarios we've been given, it looks as though we can accomplish that with 0.25 and reasonable cuts and reallocation of current funds.
Okay.
Tosca took the words right out of my mouth. If I have to go with a percentage, then I agree it's 0.25 and it covers what we need and still allows us. I agree that we could take the money, and then I know these are just scenarios, but that was listed for City Hall, that was 10%, move that up into reserves. That would be putting 35% in reserves instead of just 25%.
Okay. Well, in the beginning, too, when I heard about sales tax increase, and this isn't new, we have been kicking this idea around for a number of years. I believe I was more in the camp of Ruben Hautegui, Councilmember Hautegui, about not increasing taxes. I am self-employed, and that's the lens through which I view such things, and so I would always look at making cuts to make sure that I can balance everything out on my end. We're in a municipality, and I recognize that, and it runs differently than the business, and I recognize that. And the other thing that we've been faced with chronically is, of course, the sweeping of HERF funds. The state hammering, no new taxes again and again, but of course that burden is then passed down to cities and towns, and we're not immune to that. And we're not immune to the pension liability, and all these things add up, and it limits our ability to offer services to the community, which I don't want to say that they demand them, but certainly we've built the expectation that those services are available. And the services that we provide, we are a full-service community, more so than other communities around us. Those services do cost money. They cost a significant amount of money. Currently, we're in a great position as the economic commercial hub of the Verde Valley. That, in my opinion, won't always remain. We have a corridor that's going to change growth patterns in our Verde Valley, the 260. Camp Verde has way more square mileage than we do. I don't view Camp Verde as a threat at all. I want to just make that very clear. But they're certainly along better corridor paths, and they're the ones that will likely attract the big boxes more than Cottonwood. I've long been discussing the need to diversify our revenue stream. I do believe that a slight property tax would help fund some programs that we alone as Cottonwood residents enjoy and expect to have. However, that goes to the vote, and I know it's historically not been a real popular thing to discuss. So I don't want to limit our ability, though, to continue to have that discussion. And I am very concerned about relying 100% on sales tax, because that model of growth will reap us a Prescott Valley. And I don't mean to say anything poorly about Prescott Valley, but I personally don't want to live in a community that just has big boxes and doesn't take pride in its local economy and encourage its local economy. So that being said, my line in the sand really is that if we do go for this increase, I would agree 0.65 is a bit high. It's not out of line with our neighboring communities, and I think it's okay to be competitive with your neighboring communities on your sales tax rate. However, I want to make sure that these funds are earmarked toward the things that are important and have been voiced as important from our constituents. That would be infrastructure, primarily, reserves, which I think is crucial. We absolutely need to sock money away for the future, and to pay down our pension liability. So I would really like this council to consider earmarking those funds, letting the public know what we'll be spending this this increased revenue on. And I'll leave it at that.
Mayor?
Yes.
And the operative word when we started this discussion was compromise.
Right.
So I think everybody needs to consider that word, not just a few of us. I think everyone needs to consider that word compromise.
I agree.
I feel like coming up from zero, and maybe I should have discussed that. I can also give on the food tax if we are coming up to something along the lines of 0.25. But I do think, again, that food tax is still, in my opinion, still on the table from the mayor's earlier discussion.
Well, someone will need to make a motion, may not pass on the first.
Before that, though, to answer your question about earmarking funds, I don't feel comfortable putting strings on the money now because we don't know where we're going to need it. I think we can give direction to staff that this is what we would like to see, where we'd like to see the money spent. But as far as sitting down and saying this % must be spent on infrastructure. I think that might be short-sighted, just for what it's worth on that point.
And that will change year in, year out with each new council. Each new council will have its own priorities. I'm just more comfortable now sensing the way the wind is blowing. I just want to be able to tell my constituents, these are the reasons, this is where the money's going. And I think I just want to be able to make that commitment to the people that I represent.
And I would agree. Some of the things that were pleasantly thrown at me over this last week was that we're increasing the taxes so that we can buy the police chief's new evidence building. And that's the way they perceived the discussion last week, and that wasn't what was being said. He was trying to use that building as an example of how much it will cost for us to get a new one. They're in the planning stages. So if we can clarify to our constituents, as Rudy has, but we need to clarify it again, we want that 25% to go to the reserves. We want that 25% to go to infrastructure. We want, if we can break it down like that, I think that's marvelous. The public can see that we're sincere about not going out and buying the moon, that we are still responsible. And I do have to make a comment about people saying we need to make cuts. We have been making cuts. Every year we make cuts. So to say you need to tighten your bootstraps, the city has been. And then I guess someone said I worked here for 13 years as a council member. I've been here for 18 months as a council member. I'm not crony, etc. So my concern is for the citizens. And if we can do that, Rudy, if you would make a suggestion how we can do that, I would be all ears for that.
And that can be at a future meeting, and I agree. It's not something that we don't have the information in front of us tonight to say we want to take 0.25 of a X percentage increase, fill in the blank, toward infrastructure. But I would like to at least be able to let the public know that these are the things that we want to allocate these additional funds to. And I think it's important to let them know that up front.
Certainly, Mayor. The 0.25, being honest with you, doesn't give us much leeway to put money into reserves fast enough if we have a downturn in the next couple of years. Two is we have pension liability that we're trying to pay down. That's why we've been pushing the 6.5, or in this particular case, the 0.5. 0.25 doesn't allow us to do very much of that. We can certainly put some money aside, but the kind of dent we'll put in our public safety and liabilities is going to be very difficult. We have $20 million worth of pension liabilities, unfortunately, on our books. The other portion is setting aside money for streets. The 0.25 presentation that we gave to council doesn't give us much leeway. The 0.5 and 0.65, and of course, out of ballpark 1%. If you go back and look at those presentations, that's where we start chipping at our liability, pension liabilities. That's when we start putting some real money aside for street that we need badly, and of course, the last but not least is we're looking to try to put as much money as we can into reserves. 1.25, honestly, does not allow us to do that, and I have a feeling we'll be here next year or the year after trying to ask for more. And as you can see, it's a hard pill to swallow. It won't get any easier if we have to come here next year or the year after.
And Mayor, could I maybe give a little bit of perspective to the council and the public too? During the last 10 years and previous councils like this council, the priority has been streets and sidewalks. And I've heard talk about our reserves and where our reserves went. Well, over the last 10 years, we've spent about $20 million on replacing roadways. Started with Willard, when we extended Willard. 12th Street, from Mingus Avenue all the way to Fur. Mingus Avenue, we started at 89A and will eventually be to Main Street. We replaced 10th Street. Also during that time, we added hundreds of feet of sidewalk. at the tune, on average, of about $80,000 a year. So that's another $1 million that we've spent in sidewalks. Street maintenance at about $300,000 a year, and we just recently increased that. Again, that's a $3 million investment we've made in streets. So when you go back and you look, we've made a lot of progress, although it seems like we still have so much more to do. But the reality is, street projects are very expensive. I mean, Mingus Avenue alone is going to cost us $5 to $6 million, just from Willard down to Main Street. They're expensive projects. So just something to consider in terms of trying to move that ball further down the road. And by road, I mean roads that you can actually travel on and go down the street on. And again, as we've looked at the sidewalk projects that are in line, and the idea that it's going to take us 27 years to complete all those sidewalk projects is pretty, you know, it's an eye-opener. So again, I'm not proposing one way or the other for the council, but just to give you some perspective on how expensive these roadway and sidewalk projects are. You may want to consider that as well.
Okay. Also on tonight's agenda is the impact fee discussion, and none of the budget scenarios that we've been provided with include any type of calculation for the revenues from the impact fees. And so again, in the spirit of compromise tonight, I'd like to urge everyone to remember we're also adding a new revenue stream with that. And if I'm wrong, go ahead and tell me.
No offense, but you are incorrect. First of all, they're not impact fees. We've talked about capacity, using capacity fees. But those are enterprise funds. As you may recall, and if you don't recall, let me refresh your memory, is we have always segregated the enterprise funds. They fully fund themselves. They have their own debt service. They all have their own revenue streams. We don't fund them. However, if they go under, the general fund would have to support them. Correct. We don't support them. We don't support the general fund the other way. So they're two separate topics. That's why I haven't even bothered to bring those up, and that's why they're not included in our calculation.
And I disagree that they're two separate topics, because they are another revenue stream that we're implementing. I understand the differences between where they're allocated and how they're allocated. However, increasing those fees will also alleviate concerns about, as you just stated, the general fund having to be tapped into in case there's an issue there. It is yet another revenue stream that is whether it's for a earmark for a specific project that we are implementing tonight.
I understand. I'm just mentioning that we need to keep those separate. General fund is one thing, and capacity fees they are two different revenue streams. You're absolutely right, but they're two different funds that fund two totally different things.
Well, and I think more specifically, capacity fees can only fund water and wastewater capacity issues.
And I'm aware of that. Thank you.
And just one last thought. You know, we heard this has been a long budget process. We had our department heads come in and present to us, which I really appreciate. It was good to get that laid out to council. However, at the last meeting, we did have department heads come in as well and make a case for what an increased tax rate would do. This isn't a silver bullet. You know, this isn't going to solve all of our problems, no matter what happens tonight here with this motion. But you know, we're still. I still look at that list of services that we provide, and I still see a great amount of efficiencies that we can get. It takes some creativity, some hard work, but I still think that we can explore these other options to provide the same level of service. Maybe it won't be the city providing that same level of service, but still keep our community and our citizens whole, and yet increase the burden on our general fund. So I just don't want anyone from staff thinking that this is, if this passes tonight, that hallelujah, no more worries, because it's still going to be a difficult road to hoe for us.
And tonight we're asking for direction so we can put together that notice of intent. Mm-hmm. This by no means is obviously done. We're just asking for direction so we can prepare the notice of intent to bring to council.
And I'm ready to do just that if y'all are ready for a motion. Okay. I move to direct and authorize the mayor and staff to prepare a proposed balanced tentative fiscal year 2018-2019 budget that assumes a 0.50 increase in the city's transaction privilege tax, TPT, rate, and further direct staff to prepare a notice of intent proposing to increase the city's TPT rate by that amount for public hearing, discussion, and possible adoption of the council, by the council at a future meeting.
Question. Did anybody write down who was in favor of the 0.50 and who was in favor of the 0.25?
We'll do a roll call vote here.
Yeah, we'll wait for a motion, and then we'll do a roll call vote. I didn't write down who was...
We have a motion already.
I'm sorry, a second, excuse me.
I second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second for 0.50. City Clerk, if you could take a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Althouse?
No.
No?
No.
Councilmember Henry?
No.
Councilmember Howdigy?
No.
Councilmember Norman?
Yes.
Councilmember Piper?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Allen?
Yes.
Mayor Alinsky?
Yes.
It's 4-3.
Motion passes.
Yes. Motion passes.
Okay. Now comes the second part of this. As we have talked, we had a discussion about how to move the expenditure part of the budget forward. And in the past, we've always had the mayors sit in on our budget cuts and modifications, and that was proposed the last time rather than a committee and of council members. And that's what we would like to see. If council is comfortable with continuing to have the mayor at the table and use him as basically the conduit for the rest of the council to try to formulate a budget that we can bring back and review as a whole. Now, mind you, when that budget comes back, you will have it ahead of time so that you can go ahead and have a chance to voice your opinion, make some changes, and so forth. Always realizing that we do have deadlines in which we, staff, has to meet. There's statutory deadlines we have to meet. So we want to try to move it as quickly as we possibly can. Hence is why we'd like to go ahead and use the mayor as a conduit to get everything. I mean, we'd love to get your information too, but he's always sat in the negotiations on what we're going to cut, what we're going to put off, what we're going to add, or where our priorities are at. And he's willing to do it.
And I'm comfortable with that because everything that he does, we still get to see. If we are not agreed with something, we can always say, hey, can we negotiate that? I'm comfortable with that.
And it may well be that we bring back something that this council is still not comfortable with in the final adoption of the budget. So, you know, we have a lot of work ahead of us yet. You know, I still have a line in the sand, and I'm sure all of us still do, that we want to be comfortable with how we spend these increased revenues. So we have a lot of work ahead of us to get this before the full body so that we can all be comfortable with it. I alone can't make all the decisions for all these council members. And I'm you know, again, there's still a lot of distance between us. So I'll do the best I can to represent what I feel the consensus of us hold is important. But we need to get this back to council as quickly as possible.
I understand. We had a conversation about this the other day about the individual from the council serving. And if this council goes to a 3-3 vote, then you've got the deciding vote on that. I would like to see you reserve your vote in case there is a 3-3 tie, and then you can cast that. Otherwise, it'll be decided before you even get, you know, asked the question. So if you can be the tiebreaker, which you are, mm-hmm. without violating the how can I say, the procedure of not allowing a person who serves on any one of these committees, commissions, boards from voting outright. But the deciding vote is still yours one way or the other. Chances are it's going to come out to a 4-3, and basically your vote won't be necessary.
Okay. So we'll do a roll call vote, essentially, is what you're requesting at final adoption of the budget.
Definitely.
Right. Okay. I'm clear.
That's all I have. Do you have anything else? I think we've got our marching orders.
I think so. I think when we bring back the notice of intent, it'll be more technical than the direction, because, for example, the residential rental part of the TPT can't be raised absent a vote. And we just have to make sure that the notice of intent we bring you is compliant. But we will do that. With respect to the Mr. Hattage's request and procedurally, the mayor can certainly reserve his vote until the last one, if that accomplishes the wishes of the council.
Very good.
Okay. You've got our marching orders. We'll get on it quickly. We understand you have a very relatively short window, which will be out. Okay. We'll get something. We'll get with you, Mayor. You got a calendar ready.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Let's move on then to an easy one here. Item 2 is proposed agreement with Sunland Asphalt through the One GPS Cooperative Purchasing Group for pavement preservation and related services in an amount not to exceed $310,000. And again, to the public out there, thank you very much for remaining a part of this process. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Robert Winnicke, City Engineer. What I have for you tonight is consideration of us piggybacking off of the One GPA contract to do our pavement preservation for this current 2 fiscal year period. This encompasses pretty much everything but the road diet. At this point, we're still finalizing those plans. But we're looking to go ahead and approve a contract up to $310,000 to go ahead and do crack sealing, fog sealing of our streets, to go ahead and preserve those for some years to come, so that way we can move forward and get this done. So that's what I'm asking for you tonight, to consider approving that. If you have any questions on the contract, we have Jeff Cook here to talk about that.
Are there any questions on this contract for staff?
No.
No? Okay. Then I would move to approve the agreement with Sunland Asphalt through the One GPS Cooperative Purchasing Group for pavement preservation and related to services in an amount not to exceed $310,000.
Second.
Okay, Mayor made the motion, Councilmember Pfeiffer seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion's approved. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next, item 3, discussion, consideration, and possible approval to issue a notice of intent to adopt water and wastewater capacity fees for new and increased expanded service connections and scheduling a public hearing on the proposed new fees.
Mayor and Council, again, we have Kevin Burnett from Weldon Group, and we also have Pat Walker from Pat Walker Consulting to go over the notice of intent and also go refresh your memory on, and of course the public's memory on, the capacity fees that we've discussed. This has kind of been a long time in coming, and with that, I'll go ahead and let Pat go ahead and take it.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and
Evening.
members of city staff and city audience. This presentation we went through when Kevin was here last week, and it's basically the same presentation except that we have added some dates for the notice of intention. We'll explain that a little bit further.
He mentioned that you couldn't make the meeting because you were at a Taylor Swift concert. Can you verify that?
Kind of. I was on the outskirts of the stadium for a very long time. But anyway, traffic was wonderful. So on my presentation contents, I'm going to be talking about the introduction, review and the purpose of the study, overview of what is a capacity fee, how the fee calculation is done, the different components of it, proposed capacity fees, and the next steps. So the basic purpose of a capacity fee is to make sure that you are recognizing the impact that growth has on your community and the water and sewer infrastructure. So in other words, if you don't have the capacity to serve new growth, you don't make the improvements to do it, then you're not going to get those ratepayers in to participate in the cost of everything. So the capacity fee is to ensure that growth's paying its proportionate share and that it's going to provide funding for ongoing growth-related cost. They're one-time payments, they're not ongoing. You build a house, you take out, you go in and you pay your capacity fee for water and sewer, and it's not there the next year. So it's one time, but that's why it goes towards infrastructure or facilities. It does reflect the demands that are put on the system. In some cases with some communities, you have outstanding debt service that you can use capacity fees to pay back. But the main thing is that there has to be something called a rational nexus between the amount of the fee and the cost to serve new development. And that's why it's important to really do the calculations and understand the calculation of methodologies, because you want to be able to stop to defend it and say this is what it cost us to serve the new growth. So this is a really complex graph, but bottom line, what it does, it walks you through that there's really three types of methodologies that you can have when you design capacity fees. It can be a buy-in approach where you look at the existing infrastructure, was the capacity available for new development. You can look at an incremental, which you look at projects that are going to add capacity to serve new development, or you can look at a hybrid, which looks at both. And maybe it depends on where your community is with their infrastructure. For the water, we have used what we call the incremental, and for the sewer capacity fee, we're using a buy-in approach. And all these things add up to, you look at the capacity that's going to be created by the projects. If you're doing a buy-in, you look at the amount of capacity that's available currently of completed projects. If you're doing the incremental, you look at the capacity that the project will provide for the future. And then you look at those costs and you divide it by the capacity, and you get a cost per gallon, and then you can calculate what the impact fee is, which I'll walk through. Bottom line is that you can't use capacity fees for repair and maintenance or anything like that. It has to be for growth-related projects. So a fee calculation with the incremental approach, what we determine is that you need additional capacity to serve the new development in your community. It's based on only growth-related cost when we looked at the cost. And we looked over the next 10 years, and that was the period that we felt we could look at the best, especially with the master plan information that we had. So the capital cost we have for water is $2,397,263. And what this will go for is the Highway 260 well, as well as the Quail Canyon Reservoir. And those are the two projects that are included in that. So then we look at, based on per equivalent dwelling unit, which is a home, and there's more people in a home, like 2.5 people in a home, you look at equivalent dwelling unit for a cost, because when they come and take out their permit for the house, that's the cost, is by dwelling unit. We looked at the total peak demand capacity, which is 576,000 gallons per day that will be provided by this new well and reservoir. The peak flows per average residential customer is right now at 270 gallons per day, and that equals 1 EDU or equivalent dwelling unit. So the metric that we use, we look at the capacity to 576 gallons per day. The use per EDU is 270, so the number of houses or EDUs that we can serve in the future, and EDUs we say because it can be commercial or residential, is 2,132. So when you take the system value, units to be served, the fee per EDU is $1,124 for your water capacity fee. Depending on the size of your meter, puts a different demand on the system. These are AWWA, American Water Works Association standards, which says that a 3/4 inch meter is 1,000. That would be our standard starting base, and then it goes up from there depending on the size of the meter that's being installed at the house. Most homes have 3/4 inch meters, but some have 1 inch, and when you start going higher, you're getting into commercial. So with that, I'll turn over to Kevin to talk about the sewer fee.
Thanks, Pat. So as Pat said, we're looking at the buy-in approach on the sewer side. We talked a little bit about this last week, where we don't have any growth-related capital projects planned for the sewer utility over the next 10 years. Everything's been built that we think is going to be needed to serve new development over the next 10 years, which led us towards using the buy-in approach. So we're asking new development to buy into the system that's already been put in place and paid for by others before they came here. The treatment plant was recently expanded, so we've got the available capacity associated with that. As a refresher, what we talked about last time was what we wanted to do was determine what the value of your existing assets are today. So some of them were purchased in the 60s, some in the 70s, the 80s, and so on. So we brought those up using an inflationary index to what it would cost to purchase those assets and put them in the ground today. But at the same time, we're not asking new development to buy brand new infrastructure, because it is older infrastructure. It has depreciated over time. So when we bring up the value into today's dollars, we're then backing out what the accumulated depreciation is, recognizing the fact that it, again, isn't a brand new asset. And then the other thing that we talked about last week was There's some existing debt on the sewer utility right now. That debt is non-growth related debt. It was used to purchase the assets that are in the ground today. It's being paid for through or retired through rate revenue. So we're backing the outstanding debt out of the calculation, because if we included it, then we'd be asking new development to pay for that asset through their capacity fee, and then we'd be asking them to pay for it a second time when they're paying their rates. So we want to make sure we're not double counting, double dipping there, so we're backing it out so that that debt service is only going to be paid for through rates. So when we get to the system value, we're taking the asset valuation at $64.4 million, less the accumulated depreciation of $11.6 million, and reducing that debt service of $2.3 million to get to a total system value for the sewer utility of $51.2 million. Pat talked about the EDU factor and how we calculated that on water. We're using the same approach on sewer, but per the sewer master plan, the flows per average residential customer on the sewer side is a little bit less. That's taking into the account of the fact that on the water side, you're going to have some irrigation use in the summer months. That irrigation water isn't going into the sewer system, so it would be inappropriate to include that in the flows per EDU on the sewer side. So that's why we're at 158 as opposed to what we were showing on the water side. We've got 1.8 million gallons of capacity in the sewer treatment plants at a use of 158 gallons per EDU. That tells us that the existing capacity of the treatment plants can serve 11,381 EDUs. So if we divide the system value of the $51.2 million by the 11,381 EDUs, that tells us the value per EDU of your existing system is just over $4,500, $4,502. The same premise on the sewer side is for the water side. The larger your water meter, the more water capacity you can consume, and there's a correlation that the higher the water meter, the more sewer flow you're going to have from your development as well. So we use those AWWA standards to develop the capacity fee for the larger meter sizes. With that, I will turn it back over to Pat to talk about comparisons.
Yes, this is my favorite part, to be honest. The thing that I always like to talk about, and Kevin probably talked about this last week with you, is that that's something that's always asked. As you were talking about your sales tax tonight, that came up, what other communities are doing. But just like sales tax or capacity fees, every community is unique. Every community has different services that they provide, different levels of service they provide. Same with capacity fees. The persons per household and water use can be different from community to community. The lot size, the age of the system, changes in elevation, where you're located, geography-wise, surface water versus groundwater, and wells, treatment standards, area covered by the system, and some communities might have subsidization. Maybe they think it's okay to subsidize the water fund by the general fund and not self-supporting. So I just say that all ahead of time, because whenever you're doing comparisons, keep that in mind. If you see somebody a lot higher, there might be a really good reason. Somebody a lot lower might be another good reason. It could be any one of these things for that. So that being said, here's our water development fee capacity. As you can see, you're on the far end. You're at the end. But you know, you only have one project. You have a couple projects, the reservoir and the well, and that's all you had for the growth related. So that's why you would be. They are different stages, you know, of the growth. When you look at the sewer, you're kind of in there in between. And again, depends on where they are at with their sewer system, where they're in the development, and all the other factors I mentioned. So the next steps is that hopefully the council will approve the notice of intention and set the hearing date 60 days before the public hearing, and I'll get to the actual dates. Post the capacity fee calculations on the city's website at least 30 days before the public hearing. Publish notice of intent in newspaper one time at least 20 days before the public hearing. Hold public hearing, adopt an ordinance or a resolution approving the fees, and then the fees don't become effective until after 30 days after they're approved. So here's the timeline. Today is May 15, 2018. Hopefully a notice of intention will be adopted, as well as the date and time of the public hearing. And that's why you need to see that the public hearing on the proposed water and sewer capacity fee we have set for July 17, 2018. So in a motion, that would have to be part of it, a notice of intent, where it's at, the time and the location of it. And then that's what will be posted on the city's website. The capacity study with details will be put on the website and available at the clerk's office before June 16th. Publish a copy of the notice of intent in the local paper before June 27th, our public hearing, and then effective date of capacity fee increase will be August 16th, 2018. Now, that's the legal time frame. It may be that the city might say, we want to do it September 1, the beginning of a month, instead of mid-month. But at least you have to wait till August 16th to become effective. You can make it longer. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you'd have of Kevin or I.
Any questions for Ms. Walker? I forget your last name, Kevin, I'm sorry.
Burnett.
Well, I'm sorry?
Burnett.
Burnett. Any questions? No. I had a question about, I don't know if you can answer it. I think is the Chief Kirkendall still here, or did he?
He stepped down.
Okay, 3/4 inch meter, can we get fire flow off a 3/4 inch meter? For our fire sprinkler ordinance, can we achieve?
It has to be a 1-inch meter.
So then essentially, we won't be issuing any 3/4 inch meter.
We don't charge them for that increase either.
That's correct.
Okay, so even though they need a 1-inch meter, they still get charged for a 3/4 inch connection?
That's correct.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah.
I had a question for Mr. Rodriguez. My notes weren't clear from the last time we discussed this, because right now we have at least 2 development agreements, well, more than 2 development agreements in place. And it was my impression from the last meeting that we would still have the authority to enter into a separate development agreement despite implementing the fees. Is that correct?
I think that was answered by our attorney, Steve Horton. I believe we do have the authority to enter into a different type of development agreement.
Through an agreement, I think the council could negotiate an alternative to the capacity fee with a particular developer. So it would be an in lieu of payment to the city, or like with 89 and Vine, if the development proposed to provide its own infrastructure, obviously wouldn't be assessing a fee for capacity in the city's system, one or the other.
Okay, because a concern was expressed to me that essentially this would be applied to somebody building one house, an infill project of one structure, and that the city would then, have more favorable development agreements with developers putting in multi-housing developments or +1. Is there a way we can address that concern?
I'll speak to that just to finish my thought. I don't anticipate that would happen. To the extent we're having large developments, the one development we negotiated a fee with was pending the study and the calculation of what the rate should be, and rather than either nothing or some kind of placeholder, we elected to liquidate, to do a good faith estimate of what those fees should be. And it's a close approximation. That development got a pretty good deal, but they also agreed to pay to buy into the city's capacity before there were fees in place.
So in your opinion, we're not singling out the single-family residence infill project by implementing these fees?
No, I don't.
We actually had capacity fees when we created a development agreement with Mesquite Hills. And what we did is look at the cost of what they were adding in terms of infrastructure, in terms of waiving capacity fees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this item? All right, do I hear a motion? Or, excuse me, let me open it up to the public. Is there anyone from the public tonight that would like to address the council? You'll get another opportunity, obviously, when this comes back for hearing, but tonight's the notice of intent. Okay. Anybody care to make a motion? I'll make a motion. I move to approve the issuance of a notice of intent to adopt water and wastewater capacity fees in substantially the same form as presented by staff, and to hold a public hearing on the proposed new fees at the council's regular meeting on July 17, 2018 at 6 p.m. at the City Council Chambers.
Second.
Okay, Mayor made the motion. Councilmember Pfeiffer seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
You know, Mayor and council members, this rate is actually pretty consistent with the rate we had previously when the council decided to discontinue it. So just for general information.
Thanks to you both for coming up tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is item that Vice Mayor Allen and Councilmember Althouse wanted. I'll let you take the floor.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to step down for the second.
Okay.
It was brought to my attention that in order to discuss a contracted employee's contract, they have to be notified a specific time in advance if there's specific changes we want to be made to that contract. And so in order to meet those guidelines, you recall the last time we really delved into our contract employees, the mayor had been interested in bringing another attorney to come up and help us to evaluate the contracts. I think at this point, that's a great time to do that, and I'm reaching out to the council members for your direction if that's something you wish to do. Our next contract employee to be addressed is Mary Ann. She's coming up, and in order to meet that 90-day, 45-day, Rudy left, I don't know. In order to make that window.
45-day.
45-day, thank you. I need to bring this before the council to get your approval if it's something that you want to do.
We've already had a couple of people go through their evaluation, right?
The contract, but not when the contract's up. Mary Ann's contract will be, actually will be up.
Contract is up. Okay, I got it.
I co-sponsored this. I'm in agreement with Vice Mayor Allen on this one. I think we need some legal advice, you know, on these contracts. We have this contract that's up this year, and we have one that's up next year, so we could ask, or two that are, oh, you're right, the judge and Mr. Horton are up next year. I think, you know, there's some legal advice we need on those contracts that are up for renewal, and I think this is a good idea to bring forward and get our questions answered.
I agree. I think it's a great idea to have some representation that would just represent this body as we work through these contracts. But, you know, the other thing, too, that I feel is important is that we're consistent with all our contract employees. Right. And so and I know that when I first brought this item up, it was shortly after getting in office, and there was a big push to try to get it in place beforehand. I think it was too much too soon.
Correct.
And I don't think this council was fully comfortable with that, and I understand that. It was a new idea, hadn't been done before. I think it sounds like maybe we're finding that there's some value in it. However, I wouldn't be comfortable implementing this midstream. We've already negotiated, reviewed 2 of our contract employees, and we have 2 yet to review and 1 contract to renegotiate.
But the contracts we reviewed were not up.
Right.
It wasn't at the end of their contract. That's
no,
why.
I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, and Lesoto's was up during that
We're
that
not
process.
talking about changing the review process in any way. We're talking about the fact that a contract is up for renewal, and there are some possible changes that this council might suggest making to that contract and to future contracts. And so that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the review process in any way. We're talking about contract renewals.
I get it.
What is the cost estimate? It just says that there is a cost. Do we have an estimate?
No, it's through the attorney's budget. There would be no.
If you look through the minutes when we discussed this last, Mr. Pierce said he would give us a fixed price for all 4 contract employees, review and negotiations and all that, to represent us during their reviews for $3,500. I don't know if that's from a year ago or more, so I don't know if that's still in there.
I think it would be less, since right at this point, right now we're just asking him
for a single
right.
contract.
Then it would be $250 an hour is what is reflected in the minutes, $250 an hour.
So, I mean, are you contemplating having him here in person, or just providing support for questions via email, via telephone?
I guess that would, part of that would be up to him. I mean, we would absolutely provide him with the contract. If it would be necessary for him to come to a council meeting to present to us, or, you know, to speak to us in person, then absolutely we're going to add on top of that. But I think this is new waters for us, so I can't possibly say exactly what the number of hours. Next year, when we do the 2019, we'll have an idea. This year, it's a little bit more flexible, a little bit more loose, but I'm sure he'll give us a very good, we can go ahead and contact him and ask him what a final price is, but the need for the contract, the need for a contract review is kind of what we're touching on. We haven't chosen who's going to do it. We just need the approval to get somebody in to do it.
Kyla, are you saying rewriting an entirely new contract or going over the one they've got now and making changes?
Reviewing what they have. If that's something that the employee is going to want to continue to work with, we need him to review what they have and then discuss with us how we want to proceed. Do we want to make changes to that? Do we want to, what is most beneficial to us? What's most beneficial to the employee? We've never had the contract reviews, so we really don't know. I'm sorry?
Will the employee have input too?
My assumption is yes, absolutely.
Well, what was your question? I'm sorry to interrupt. What was your
Will
question?
the employee have input too?
Oh, okay.
Or also?
So are these amounts that were, well, I guess the city attorney recused himself, but maybe if any other council member knows, are these, you know, is that included in our current attorney budget, X number of hours for contract review? I'm not familiar with how contracts have been renegotiated in the past for the contract employees.
I can probably answer that, and if you notice, I didn't recuse myself because this isn't going to impact me. I'm going to escape before my contract's But Steve's got a budget that allows for the hiring of outside counsel to assist on a variety of different topics, so it would come out of Steve's budget. There is money budgeted in there for this kind of occurrence. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but not specifically for this purpose, but we have a set of funds set aside for outside attorney assistance.
And thank you for that. I think I inartfully was asking about whether, you know, we have our budget with our city attorney and whether that these amounts, say it's 20 hours for contract review, would, you know, that there would be a savings there with our city attorney's time that could be applied so that it's not an extra expense, it's already built in and captured into the budget. And I guess I should have started that question by asking, isn't our city clerk's review coming up before the next budget is approved?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
but there's money in the current budget for things like this, when he has to go out and get an attorney to help with water or I can't, you know, whatever it may be that he's not an expert on, there's money in the budget for those types of things.
I'm not sure what you were looking for there.
Well, now a couple of things. I mean, we don't have any information about how much this will cost to make sure that there is enough money in this current budget first. And then second of all, the question was, again, is this something that historically has been budgeted when our city attorney looks at however many hours and formulates his budget at the beginning of the year, something that he had budgeted to perform himself?
I'm going to have to say probably not. However, the budget line item is there because we have not historically re-reviewed contracts, but this is a new council and we have new ideas and this is one of them.
And generally this, I mean, what you're asking for is somebody who specializes in these kind of contracts and personnel issues. And, you know, that's why initially we talked about Justin Pierce, because we've used him for personnel issues in the past. And so this may not be an area where Steve has the expertise that you're looking for. And so consequently, he wouldn't necessarily even do this if he could. We would more likely go outside and get somebody who kind of specializes in these kind of issues. And again, I don't know if I answered your question, but and certainly, you know, we can call Justin and confirm, you know, 35, it was $3,500.
Not to exceed.
Yeah, if that still holds, and if it does, what does that include? I mean, does that just include a review of the contracts and then some kind of a written guidance to the council, or, you know, does that, you know, allow him to come up and actually talk to the council about any specific contract or not? We can ask him all of that, and I can get back to you with that information.
I think that would be helpful in general. I mean, I supported this. I wasn't at the meeting where the vote was taken, but in the prior meeting where this was discussed, I did support outside counsel. I think it is a very useful tool. But I just think, as with the prior meeting, the first meeting where we discussed this, we don't have some good information as far as the costs, what we're getting for that cost, if we've got still budgeted, you know, amounts allowable in the budget to be able to proceed.
So in the minutes from the last time we discussed this, many council members were fine with having Horton represent us in this process. I still think we're midstream, so I'm still not totally on board with this, but I'm curious what's changed in having our attorney represent us. Why the need now for outside counsel?
I think what's changed now is last time we felt like we were being blindsided. Those that didn't support you, we felt like we weren't being communicated with. I've brought this to council members as a request. Mm-hmm. We have a contract employee coming up, so we need to get it reviewed. I'm not a contract negotiator. I'm clueless about contracts. And it was brought to my attention that if this is something that we're going to do, that's one of the major complaints that we've gotten from the public is the amount of money our contract employees make, et cetera. So this is the best way to do that, is say, okay, we're going to review their contracts. We're going to bring them back before council. I mean, this is the most, to me, proactive way to address our citizens' complaints, to say this is what we're doing, we're working on that, and have somebody review it.
I think in the past, contracts have just been, from what I noticed sitting out there, contracts have just been either renewed or not renewed, but for the most part just renewed, and there wasn't really a full contract evaluation. And this is a new council with new ideas, and we want to actually look at what's in the contract and possibly make changes. And because we're not personnel lawyers, you know, we'd like some legal advice on that. And I don't feel Mr. Horton has that, and we'd be doing his contract next year, and so it kind of is, I mean, he's sitting down there for a reason. It's kind of a strange situation to ask him to help us contract negotiate his own contract.
No, I'm pleased to see that some members of the council are now finding value in this. Again, I think it's midstream, so I'm concerned about the other evaluations we've performed, and you know, I think this process should be put in place with given notice before all the evaluations are performed.
Elaborate.
And I know this is a contract negotiation specifically, but so too do we have a contract negotiation with Judge Lesota in the beginning. And even, I still find value in just having somebody there represent us as we work through the evaluation process, although this council did work, you know, to get a written evaluation, and I'm comfortable with that, so at least we've got that. But I think we need to give our contract employees a fair shake from...
Elaborate what midstream is.
Midstream is that we did not use any outside counsel for the other. When we discussed the process we were going to use for evaluating our contract employees, this was brought up. We had a lot of lengthy discussions about how we were going to put this process together, and I know that consistency has been important to this council, And I just feel like it would be inconsistent to, after we've already discussed the process, we put the process in place, to then change that process midway through our year of contract employee
The evaluation
negotiations.
process isn't being changed, and I have a question, because if that's where you stand, then, okay, Mary Ann's contract is coming up, this is midstream, and the city attorney's contract is coming up, and so we're not going to bring in outside help for either of those because we didn't do it for Judge Lesota? Is that what you're saying?
Because we didn't put the process in place in the beginning when we decided what the process was going to be.
Can't we do that now?
We can. I'm just telling you I don't agree with it, but absolutely.
I think we're talking about two different things, though. Judge Lesota's, it was his evaluation. His contract was not up for renewal. And the city clerk's contract is up for renewal. If we look at how the contracts are spread across, we have, well, Doug's won't matter, the city manager doesn't really matter, but it depends on what we negotiate. Is that a 2-year contract or a 5-year contract? Mr. Horton's was a 5-year contract where Mary Ann's was, I believe, a 2-year contract. So we're always going to be, we're never going to get them, all lined up the same way council is. We're not talking about the evaluation process, the forms, or any of that. This is since the judge, and some of us were new, and we felt like it was being shoved at us, and we were told that this lawyer was coming up when we hadn't even heard. I mean, I found out through an email that the lawyer was coming up, and so that's why you got pushback. This is really the first contract negotiation that we're doing, besides the judges, but, we just, I hadn't even been here up here very long, so we're really talking about two different things.
I think I said where I stand on it. I'm not going to dominate the floor here, but it's, I presented it before for a vote, and we can present it again here for a vote and see what the council wants to do. We can change anything midstream. I'm just saying that consistency has been something that we value is all in the past. But absolutely, we can present anything, and any council member is willing to or able to put anything on the agenda. And that's what we have before us tonight.
So did we leave it at, we were going to leave it the way it is right now, except for Mr. Horton's, and then we would get an attorney to come in and help us with his?
No, I would prefer to get one. Let's start it. Let's do it this time. Let's direct staff to go ahead and secure whoever we're going to secure, and then we can also bring figures back and give us an idea of what it's going to cost, because we have some concerns there, although I know the money is available in the city, in the attorney's budget. But I would prefer to happen now. Whoever our next employee just happens to be Mary Ann. Let's get it going now because her contract is up. That would be my preference. That would be my direction to staff.
I agree.
And if there's no other discussion, then make a motion.
I think it was direction only.
Oh.
Yeah. Direction only.
Direction only.
How does that work? I didn't put the agenda item together, but how does that work?
Essentially, it's just, if the majority of the council supports it, we'll get more information.
How do we determine if a majority of the council supports it without a vote?
Well, as we do with any direction, every time we just do direction, we could come with a consensus. It's not a vote.
Then do you have your direction?
Well, the two others haven't. We haven't.
No. So it sounds to me like the council would like a little more information about what it's going to cost and exactly what services are going to be provided for that.
That's good.
Correct.
Okay.
And can I ask Rudy or Doug, how does this affect the fact that we need to give 45 days notice? Because I believe that review, we're at 45 days. Because the clerk's review is June 30th of 2018, so we're at 45 days right now.
Well, at 45 days, I would figure that you would have to, the council would have to agree to send a notice that we're going to be looking at it. That's about it. Now, council can always just, if they decide not to, just drop it altogether.
That's not what was written in this, so I was not sure the appropriate response there, because that's not in the, I didn't, Mary Ann was good enough to put the council action form together for me. I didn't even review it. So we can't really give you, I mean, we can give you direction, but we can't give Mary Ann without voting on it.
And did we notice, I don't know if we even have to, I mean, we're veering a little into uncomfortable waters for me, as far as it's one thing to discuss the position, but we're also discussing a particular employee. I don't know if we provided notice, even though we're not negotiating specific terms. I would like to err on the side of caution with regard to providing our contract employees notice if we are discussing any aspect of their contract, and I don't know if that occurred tonight. So again, we keep using a specific employee's name, not the position. And
well, to me, it's just, do we want to start the process, not necessarily on this, but is this something that we're going to be doing in the future? So we can go ahead and put it on our calendar ahead of time to make sure that when someone's contract is going to come up, because that way you've got a city manager is going to be coming on board, and you're going to have to negotiate their contract too. It would be good to have someone that is aware of other contracts in the area. But for this particular instance, we either do give us directions, we can contact Steve Pierce Coleman and maybe get his direction from it. His rate that he's giving us is what he has for the AMRRP, the Arizona Risk Retention Pool. That's the rate he's giving us, and I don't think they raised it he raised it this last year, so chances are the rates are probably going to be the same.
And I apologize, my intent wasn't to single out an employee. This was the first employee contract coming up. That wasn't my intent, was to single out an individual.
And exactly so. When we talked to Judge, and you're absolutely right, we were talking just reviewing him and just moving on, because we weren't actually, his contract isn't up, so we didn't bother to bring it up. Unfortunately, we've got one that's coming up, and then the next one that's coming, I think we've got 2 more coming up about 6 months or a year after that. Whatever council wants to do is fine. I can contact Pierce Coleman and ask him how we would be good for us to proceed, and then go from there. Mind you, if when it comes to professional services like this, we don't have to go out to bid or anything. Council can just go ahead and pick an attorney, or any professional services. We can pick an attorney off right off the bat, provided it's not over $50,000. And if he charges that much.
I would reel that back in so fast. No.
Really?
And I think Rudy can probably also ask him about any notifications that have to be made to contract employees.
So then I would request direction and then get your consensus to reach out to, I don't remember Justin Pierce's organization.
Pierce Coleman.
And Pierce Coleman, get his costs, and also how we would proceed further so that we do this in an appropriate manner. Okay. And consensus.
I agree.
Tosca's not talking.
I already said my opinion. I don't need to repeat it, so I think.
So it seems like we have direction. We can proceed.
And this will come back then for a vote.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
All right, next item is claims and adjustments.
Move to pay the claims and adjustments.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Henry made the motion. Councilmember Pfeiffer seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay. And next, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember, or the Mayor made the motion. Who seconded that?
I did.
Councilmember Henry seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.